course, I have the. Telling I have the. They're cutting the lawn here.
Oh, perfect.
Of course,
Right. I mean, hey, it happens. And welcome everybody to the Rich Ensor show where his lawn is being cut right now. This is Michael Rasile on For the Love of Sports. This is where I get to have conversations with people in the sports business industry and see what happens in between. Rich, how you doing today?
Doing well, Michael. Glad to be on.
I appreciate you. I appreciate our good friend, mutual friend, David Soroti, putting us in contact. Rich, you may have heard his name once or twice. Rich Ensor is the commissioner of the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, the other MAC, I guess. Is that
The
okay to
Big
say it
Mac,
that way? The
Michael. The
Big
Big
MAC.
Mac.
There we go. I'm here up in the Northeast, man. So
I'm all
I'm not
about
sure.
branding. So,
I love it. The Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference up here in the Northeast. He was a former member of the Division One Council. He's a member of the Division One Women's Basketball Committee, former director of marketing at Seton Hall, SID at St. Peter's, and assistant professor over there at UMass Amherst. But David, very excited. Or Rich, I'm sorry, I talked to a David earlier today. Rich, very excited to get to chat with you today about what the last 30 plus years as a commissioner has been like and helping students and athletes in schools. The first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
well, sports for me it brings out the best and the worst of people, and I enjoy the operations that go into producing the games and the content, and I consider myself an operations guy when it's all said and done. I used to think myself more marketing, and I do a lot of that. But I have to say, when I try to define what I like best, it's just putting it all together into a efficient operation.
I like that. And just trying, and I'm sure right now that's a very easy task for you to take care of, especially with the way the world is. No, you're shaking your head. That's surprising. How weird.
No, not these days. It hasn't been easy, and it's rarely been easy, but it's certainly not easy right now.
No, I'm sure. And I guess not, I don't know if I'm excited to talk about the pandemic and COVID, but I'm definitely interested to talk with you about that. But I'm also interested in, I guess, why college athletics? So I rattled off a little bit here. As I said, the SID over at St. Peter's, you were the director of marketing in Seton Hall, and then kind of went right into being commissioner. So I'm curious about that jump, but I'm also curious, like, what is it about college athletics that from a young age you kind of decided, hey, this is where I want to spend a lot of my life.
Well, partly it was just opportunity. It's where the opportunities presented themselves to me. I came up through a very traditional route of having worked as a team manager at St. Peter's. And oftentimes in those days, you would then transition into some form of administration, which I did over time. My first big jump was to be an assistant AD at St. Louis University for my former basketball coach, Dick McDonald, who was then AD there. So it had those kind of relationships. And so I kind of had those opportunities and went into it. I've always liked college sports, though, because there's turnover. The players are always different. They always have enthusiasm. We're a coaches league, so you don't run into all the necessarily some of the issues you do in the majors with the players just pushing for control, if you will. That's what we see nowadays. So it's got a very defined administrative function with the coaches reporting the ADs, reporting the commissioners, and so forth. So that's always appealed to me. And one of the things in the MAAC was I came out of a school at St. Peter's that was one of the founders here in this league. And so I had a relationship with the type of concerns about academics and athletics that the MAAC schools exhibit and make part of their overall mission statement. So I always wanted to keep that as where I wanted to work, someplace that valued both, not just one over the other. So it's been a great relationship, and I always feel very honored to be able to represent these schools, never have to apologize for them in any way, shape, or form, and that's appealing to me. So,
I
and
like
they've
that.
given me a lot of free reign over the years. I've been successful and been able to grow it, and so the ability to do that has been appealing to me as well.
The Big Mac. Let's get it, Rich. And I guess, like, so you say you're given free reign. I mean, I'll be very honest. Again, like with I know some of the commissioners off the top of my head for the Power Five conference. Nope, the Big Ten commissioner just retired, didn't he? So never mind. I take
No,
that
the
back.
ACC did.
Okay, that's what it
John
was.
Swafford, he's getting ready to retire.
Okay, well,
Yeah, you
so
got Swafford and Sankey. You've got we. You're probably thinking of Jim Delaney at the Big
that's
Ten. Yeah.
yep.
So Kevin
Mhm.
Warren just took over there. Larry Scott's now at the Pac-12, and then we have at the Big 12. I could see his face, can't think of his name. But anyhow,
I'm
you
sure
know,
he's not listening, so don't worry.
yeah, these are all people that we work with regularly, though. Bob Bowlesby, by the way. But those five certainly have a lot to say about the structure of D1 athletics and how the NCAA operates. But within the bigger umbrella of Division One, there's lots of room to be successful, build a career, not necessarily at that top level, but certainly one that's rewarding. And for me, I raised a family in this league, and three of the four kids went to schools in the league as part of my agreement, and part of my employment agreement.
Uh-huh.
And so it's been something I've always enjoyed and being part of it.
And so that was going to be, getting to the question, like, what exactly does a commissioner of, the Big MAAC do? Like, again, I hear and see those other names all the time, and they're, it's all about the hundreds of millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
I have to assume, I'm sorry, that you're not quite at that level, but like, so what exactly does a commissioner of a league like this do with 11 teams, with a lot of basketball, no football? And how are you really able, as you said, to take free reign and grow something like this?
Well, all leagues have certain core functions, no matter if you're the Big Ten or the Big MAAC. You have scheduling is a major function, broadcasting, marketing, championship operations, statistics, awards. Those are just core functions that each one of us do. Everybody has a compliance function with the NCAA to make sure the rules are being followed. So my department, when it's fully staffed, and we're not right now, we've just gone through a cutback because of the
Mhm.
COVID-19 budget. But when I had all 12 people here working, they were divided in those kind of operational structures. So we have 4 or 5 people that work in championships. I have a finance person, a compliance person, a couple of PR people, a videographer, and a marketing person. So those are the core functions of any conference. And then part of my job is then to represent the league within the NCAA and within the governance structure. So I get very involved in that, both on committee structure, but even within the CCA, which is the Collegiate Commissioners Association, where all 32 D1 conferences operate. I've chaired that. I've been the president of once. I'm currently chair of the CCA 22, which is all the non-FBS football conferences. So we have to organize agendas and operations with the NCAA. Have a lot of that going on right now in relation to the COVID-19 and for instance, most recently the dropping of fall sports. What are we going to run those in the spring now? And getting ready for whatever comes our way with basketball, because we don't want to miss another basketball season. So those are the kind of things I do day to day. As far as having free reign, basically I come up with a strategic plan every 3 to 5 years. I present it to the board. The board of the MAAC is made up of the 11 college presidents, and in there I'll lay out a plan for the league for a period of time, and special projects that I may want to work on, and elements I see as being opportunities for the league to take advantage of. So early in my career, a lot of that, and we were much smaller then too. We only had 3 or 4 people when I came on board, but we were really focused on maintaining membership, because at that time there was a realignment going on. This is 1988. And the MAAC, which had started out as a metropolitan league made up of pretty much a bus league, if you will, it was Army, Fordham, Manhattan, Iona, St. Peter's, and Fairfield. And so it was very, very local, and had grown over time to include Holy Cross and LaSalle, and then others as we went along. It had come to a crossroads right before I got hired, And of that original 8 group when I got here, 4 of them were leaving to form the Patriot League, which still exists today.
Mhm.
And we were in a position where we needed to expand immediately or we were going to go out of business under the NCAA regulations. You have to have 7 members that play basketball, and they have to play. Now they have to be playing continuously for 6 years to count for an NCAA AQ. In those days, they were just building those rules. So we were
Mhm.
trying to get in under the wire, get grandfathered in. So immediately I got hired. They said, fix the budget. We want a broadcasting package. And by the way, we need to add 4 or 5 members or we're going to be out of business. Can you get that done in the next 60 days? So we really did work on that. And the president of St. Peter's then, Father Ed Glenn, who's since passed, but great friend and a great friend of athletics. He worked with I and a couple of others, and we went out and eventually secured Siena, Niagara, Canisius, and Loyola, Baltimore to become 4 members. And it brought us up to 12 for a short period of time. And then once the other schools departed to form the Patriot League, we went to 8. And we varied over the years from anywhere as high as 12 as low as 8 during my tenure. But there's always there's always changes. So we added Ryder and Marist along the way in another period of time, and then we lost LaSalle and over time Loyola. Typically, what happens in this league, the Patriot League fishes in my pond, so I've lost any number of schools to the Patriot League, and that's usually about academics. Although with Loyola, it was really about lacrosse at a high level. And then I typically have fished in the Northeast Conference pool in recent years. Before that, we brought in schools from the North Atlantic League, which is a long time ago, before your day, Michael. And we were able. That's where Niagara, Canisius, and Siena came from. So we've rated conferences up, frankly, and we've been rated. That's the nature of realignment. It's a nice way of saying rating. And so
I like the fishing in their pond. I think that's a little bit of a nicer way to say it. But
yeah.
I mean, so it seems very political, I guess, for lack of a better term. And it seems like there's a lot of things going on that us, people watching don't really see. I mean, what do those? I don't want to call them backdoor conversations because that makes them sound shady. What do those fishing trips look like and sound like when you are talking to some of these other schools and really just like how do those pitches go and are are you allowed to talk to them? Like, I'm really
Yeah, you can
curious because
always,
I've never
yeah, you can
really.
have conversation anytime you want.
Mhm.
Um, well, the first go around, it was really, we just called them up. Frankly, we say, hey, we're looking for members. Are you interested? We had a group of 6 we interviewed actually. Hartford was in the mix as well as somebody else. I can't think of it who it is now. But in any case, we had OFDU was in that mix too, and we took the 4 that we did. So in that, we were very upfront. We needed to expand, So when in other cases it was strategic. With Ryder and Marist, I was looking to get a school with Ryder to replace LaSalle in the South Jersey, Philly corridor, if you will.
Mhm.
And Marist was a nice fit for the space between, Manhattan and Iona to Siena and Albany. So it brought in a good rival for those schools. And they have developed into rivalries, whether it's Ryder or St. Peter's or Marist and Siena. So that was kind of that. And we were also at that point also concerned about a new regulation that required to have 7 continuous members for 6 years. We were at 8, and you never want to be too close to the edge. So that kind of pushed my rationale with the presidents, while I was also looking to add quality to the league. And we're a basketball league, so both those schools have pretty good basketball reps. Our most recent expansion, when we added Monmouth and Quinnipiac, uh, I'm trying to think how that got started. Well, we knew we were losing Loyola to the Patriot League, so we did want to have an even number. Obviously, we didn't end up at an even number because we're at 11. But I was literally driving home. I live in South Jersey in Ocean County, And I've always been familiar with Monmouth just for I grew up in Bricktown. I live in Winoka Harbor now. So I'm from that region. So I said, I've got to call Marilyn McNeely AD at Monmouth and see if they're shopping for conference realignment themselves. Now, they're a football school, they have football, and we weren't a natural fit for them, but they were looking to upgrade their football too and had an opportunity to do that, moving to the Big South. So it kind of
Mhm.
was just. It was just a little bit of kismet, but you know how much thought went into it. I'm driving down the Parkway, and I'm thinking I got to call mom.
That would be a good one.
And
That's funny.
Quinnipiac had been knocking at our door for 5 or 6 years. Jack McDonald used to call me each year. He was the AD at Quinnipiac, and I'd say, Jack, no, not now, not now. You know, because Fairfield at one point was a little reluctant to bring another Connecticut school into the mix. That's kind of why Hartford didn't get in it back in the day as well. But there came a time when they saw the value of having a rival in state. So that kind of changed. And sometimes it's a matter of opinions changing on campuses, presidents come and go, boards of directors change. So the thought process around Quinnipiac became a lot more positive. So then we had 11, and who was going to be 12th? Well, we couldn't decide on 12th. It was really, it often comes down to it. There's just not enough there to make a decision, you know. So we've been at 11 for a while. We did have a conversation with Robert Morris about a year ago, yeah, almost 2 years now, and they were interested. I thought Pittsburgh made some sense for our Western New York schools. You know, it'd be a fairly decent rival, not too far from Buffalo. But for one reason or another, the schools just weren't ready again to add the 12th. And subsequently, the Robert Morris has announced they're going to the Horizon League. So if a school's looking, they'll normally start reaching out to conferences. If we're looking, we'll call schools. It's kind of like that.
It is very interesting.
I
Very,
always
very
say it's like
interesting.
high school lunchroom.
Yes.
There's a table you want to be at where all the cool kids sit, you know, say that's a Big East for sake of argument. And then there's a table you're at, which you're saying, I don't belong here. And then you say, well, what's between me and the Big East? Well, maybe it's a MAAC, you know. But oftentimes it is that, you know, schools have aspirations. These are business decisions. They're trying to align themselves around the mission or areas where they have high alumni concentrations. So many things go into it that it's not always about athletics. Frankly, it's frankly more about the other. And athletics, we figure if we're talking to a school like that, they have a pretty good athletic program.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, you don't want to. So I'm a Rutgers graduate. My first year at Rutgers, we were in the Big East. My second year at Rutgers, we were at the AAC. And then the year after I graduated, they went to the Big Ten, which we thought would have been a lot of fun, but it has not been any fun yet because Rutgers has been terrible. But the money that is involved is significant, and that's why
It's major.
the
Yeah,
Big Ten
those
wanted Rutgers.
programs
So
are.
that's why it's always been interesting to me, especially kind of these political. And again, obviously on the Big Mac level, it's not quite the same as it is on the Big Ten level, where there used to be 6 power conferences and now there's only 5 because they pretty much just said Big East,
Don't
just
tell
go
that
play
to the
basketball.
American.
Oh no, okay, I won't tell the American. If you can get
That's
the American commissioner on here, I promise I won't
Mike
tell that.
Oresco. He's a good guy. Have you reached out to him?
Not yet, but I might after this.
Yeah.
I'll tell him I'm sorry for what I said, but
Yeah.
no, I just it's always very interesting to me to see kind of how these things happen, you know, way, way, way before they happen. I guess, as you've been saying, like you're driving down the Parkway, you're calling up Monmouth, and then it's not till a few months later where the rumblings start coming out, right? And that's
Yeah,
when they
well,
start to. So it's always very interesting to me to kind of hear that back door, like how what the sausage was actually made. Considering again, while I was at a heavy air quotes football school, we saw exactly kind of what was happening in front of our eyes, and all of a sudden the Big East didn't exist, and then all of a sudden we're in the AAC and we're playing Kent State, and then we lose to Kent State, and it was just very confusing watching all of it happen as a semi-drunk college student.
I know Pat Hobbs is the AD there, was my law school dean. So I've known Pat for a while, at least at the end of my law school. I didn't go to law school right out of college, so I was a little older, but he's done a nice job with that transition. It's extremely expensive. Ohio State's athletic budget's $110 million. Think about
Mm-hmm.
that. It's just amazing. And so even if you're spending 60 or 70, you're on the bottom third of that group
Mm-hmm.
of schools. And frankly, we have what is known as the Commissioner Cup, which is the award you give out to the program that has the most success across all the sports. Well, the truth of that is 90% of that reflects budgets,
Mm-hmm.
and then 10% reflects the quality of the athletes and coaching they get. Now you can move up and down even if you don't have the same budget level as some of the ones that are at the top, but eventually you kind of settle back into that realm where your budget resides, because without the resources to recruit and run and travel and do the kind of scheduling that requires you to move up into the next tier, you're not going to, it's going to be hard to really break into the top tier of any conference.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you probably took a look at the Big Ten and lined up their budgets with their Commissioner Cup, there'll be a strong correlation. It's probably not as much as a MAAC because frankly their budgets are just so high, but there's probably more correlation than most people think there is.
Oh no, I'm sure it's a very direct correlation, unfortunately, but it is what it is, right? I mean, I'm sure
Yeah,
the
it is.
commissioners is that something you lose sleep over at night? The
No,
commissioners cup? Exactly.
no.
Yeah, it's
In
just one
fact,
of
I've
those things.
often said should be called the Directors Cup, because the
Oh,
guys that fight over that and the women that fight over that are the ADs, not,
I
not
like
me. I
that.
just hand it out at the end of the day.
I love
So
it.
we've had pitched battles over the points structure around the Commissioner Cup. You can't imagine.
Oh, I could imagine. And I don't really want to get too deep into that. That just sounds like
Yeah.
a lot of petty fighting. But you
Well,
brought
not petty. It's just, structure. How do you build it to reflect what's best for
Mhm.
you?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But you did bring up something a little a couple minutes ago when talking about some of this realignment. There was the one school, I apologize, I can't remember exactly who it was, that they had the football program that was able to go to the Big South, and the
Yeah, it's
basketball
Monmouth.
program, Monmouth, thank you, was able to then come to the Big Mac. And with that in mind, like how being a basketball specific school, obviously you've been here your whole time. So that's really, all you know, but how how is it do you see it being different than some of these other schools that obviously football runs the show? That's where all the revenue
Hmm.
comes from. And then we're hearing all these arguments. Well, football loses its revenue. All these other sports are going to lose and they're not going to exist anymore. But clearly that's not the case because you guys don't have football and you still have all these sports. So give me a little insight on there because it's a very confusing just conversation that you hear in the media all the time, which I don't really know what's real and what's not.
Well, on the top level, when they say that if football goes away, they're talking about the revenue stream
Hmm.
that funds those big programs. That 110 million from Ohio State, about 80 million of it's probably related to football,
Hmm.
either through broadcasting rights or ticket sales, fundraising, and so forth. So when they say there's no football and a lot of that drops off the ledger, that's what they're saying about losing the funding for those other programs. The fact of the matter is they'll probably figure out a way to do it, but they're going to have some losses for the short term and probably will run up some debt, not like anybody else who's having problems with income. The Pac-12, I've read, I don't know this personally, but I've read that they've gone out and secured a $900 million loan where the member schools there can draw down on that for 5 years and pay it off, so they can fund their programs this year with the loss of the football revenue. So that's all pretty real. On our level, our budgets are built for the year to year based on the program scope and what their mission and goals are. So it's not driven by revenue so much. It's really a function of the athletic budget as part of the university budget. Even at Rutgers, you're running a separate budget line absent the university line. And then the university may be fronting some of the funds you need in order to run that because you've been at a deficit for a while. But when that gets eliminated at some point, the Big Ten revenues grow to the point where you're in a plus situation, that'll get paid back. Um, but in our case, we're not doing that. We're typically running off of a budget line within the university budget. Sometimes there's fees that are structured into it. We don't have that universally in the MAAC, but they have revenue streams, but nothing like the majors. It's really all about the university budget and priorities.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess it does make sense that when we're talking. I mean, does all the schools in the MAAC combined have a budget of 110 million for athletics?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Close.
It might be in the neighborhood. We have three
Okay.
schools with football now. Well, two with football. We have Marist and Monmouth. Marist runs it on a non-scholarship basis.
Okay.
And we have a couple of three hockey programs. So we're probably pushing that, but I wouldn't know right off the top of my head. It's not something we really track.
Well, not even that. It's just kind of the comparison to a one school in the Big Ten has that much of a budget compared to these 11 schools. So obviously, it's going to be a little different when looking at that. I know
Well,
we
I'm
can't
sure I have
really.
institutional budgets that aren't as big as Ohio State's athletic budget. I mean,
I
forget
believe that.
athletics,
I believe that.
$120 million. You can run a pretty good school off of that.
I think we could. Rich. Let's see what we could do there. And I guess
Yeah.
with that, like how in your 30 years you've been doing the 30 plus years you've been doing this, I mean, the internet became a thing.
Biggest change in the business while I've been here is the internet and the access to broadcasting and access to public markets. When I was first year, basically, we were in the New York region. The Daily News and New York Times might put our score in. They might occasionally, if we had a special team, write something about us, but there was no sustained publicity. It was pretty much word of mouth through the institutions. You might have a couple of TV games on local networks. You might have a radio network. Now today, and beginning really pretty much when I got here, we were able to go online and get all our information to our fans directly, so you no longer had filters. We've been able to build a broadcasting network. All 11 schools have broadcasting studios. We now broadcast all our content on ESPN 3 and Plus, and we also have a U package. But we're doing I think we did almost 800 plus games of one form or another last year. So we have our own broadcast packages. It's just amazing the difference what the internet has brought to us. Now, on the downside, newspapers have gone away, but that really hasn't impacted us because we weren't getting that much cover from newspapers to begin with. So
I was going to say that's really not that bad. I mean,
no, and we still occasionally will get something in the New York Times or whatever, but it's a much different business model when you can reach your consumer directly, and that affects things like enrollment. The ability to service the alumni, and also just to build general awareness of your programs for recruiting purposes. So, very big difference was the internet. That was the biggest one.
Yeah, I can see that, especially with the streaming opportunity over the last couple of years. And as you said, you can see it directly with enrollment. You can see it directly with recruiting. What is it like when one of your schools, I mean, every year, one of your schools is going to the NCAA tournament at least.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an even more direct route? If one of these schools makes it to that second weekend where you can see that kind of pop in enrollment, in recruitment, and really see that, and then that kind of trickles down to the rest of the conference?
Well, one of my presidents always said the minute they won the NCAA Q and men's basketball, that was $1 million worth of free publicity for the school.
Hello.
Like the first day. So when Manhattan would win the MAAC tournament, and the Daily News had it on the back page of their paper on the sports side, they couldn't get that coverage, ever. So yeah, the NCAA is a big deal for us, and that's why some of the discussions you hear about AQ access and everything else, and we're going through that right now with this rescheduling of the fall. We need that. I mean, we have guarantees to that, and it's something we're willing to fight with the majors on. There aren't that many things we fight with the majors on. AQ access is one of the things.
What is AQ access?
When you get an automatic bid to a conference, that's an automatic qualifier, an AQ. So in basketball, all 32 conferences get an AQ. The bracket is 68 teams on the men's side, 64 on the women. Half the bracket has to be held for the automatic qualifiers. The other half is for at-large bids. That's why 64 is the number you often see. The men expanded it a couple of years ago to get a few more opportunities because they could. The women really don't need it. They have enough as far as the bracket goes. So that's extremely important. So those were one of the main things that over the years we have really pushed back on the A5 when they start trying to monkey around with that AQ axis. And frankly, they don't. They recognize how important it is to us.
Yeah, I mean that's the fun of it. Like like I think a couple years ago, Syracuse was like a 9 seed and they made it to the Final Four, and everyone's just like, big deal. It's Syracuse. It's like this gigantic basketball school. But when you see George Mason or Florida Gulf Coast, like that is a national story.
Sure.
Like it's so much more to now. Hey, I'm a Duke fan. I want them to win every game. But let's be honest, when Duke loses to one of those teams, I laugh hysterically because I mean, shoot, how often does Duke lose to Lehigh, who is literally in my backyard? I've been to the school, I've been to the place before. So it's always so funny to see something like that. Obviously, I was devastated that night, but afterwards it was kind of fun. So, yeah, I mean, taking these smaller schools out, that ruins like the literal magic part of the tournament. I mean, I hope nothing like that ever happens.
Yeah, we all pray for that, believe me. And most people recognize that, but it's one of those things that we'll always debate within the closed doors of the CCA or the NCAA. But yeah, I think the Cinderella story has been great. And the program development, Gonzaga, what they've done over the years, and Butler and others like that, those are great storylines. Florida Gulf Coast and the Big East is really built largely from that basis. All those schools that formed the Big East back in the day were very MAAC-like. Seton Hall wasn't all that much different than Fordham. Fordham was in the MAAC, Seton Hall was in the Big East. It's just where those leagues went afterwards that made them special.
And so I do actually, one thing I'm really interested in hearing, maybe not even your opinion, but what you've been hearing from the rest of the commissioners and really just around the NCAA is based on the NIL, the name, image, likeness things that are going on, and especially it's a completely different topic of conversation, I think, especially for a place like the MAAC, because again, it's not one of these football schools. It's not like, one of the number one quarterback recruits going to Oklahoma. He's going to sign a $300,000 endorsement deal for the kids at the schools that you're working with. What have you been hearing from the presidents? What have you been hearing from other, I guess, commissioners of the types of leagues that you're similar to in how they're looking at this, and if people are for it, against it, or just kind of neutral on it?
Well, I think early on, a lot of us were probably against it. We really do believe in the amateurism model. But as the majors have gotten so major, they've grown. It's very hard to justify that, a coach is making, 4 or 5 million a year and the players get nothing for their image and likeness. So we've been generally supportive of the last 10 years for the NIL options being available to the athletes. That being said, I don't envision it being a huge issue in our league. We may get somebody that comes in that has a particularly hot handle on one of the social media sites and is drawing some revenue off of that. We're not going to lose sleep over that. We're not recruiting around it. It's not like we can promise you that when you get here. If you develop it on your own, so be it. The athletes have enough trouble trying to go to school and play their sport without trying to manage a career too, and they will have to manage it because the schools aren't going to manage it for them. That's one thing we've made pretty clear, that if you want to take this on, fine, but it's your responsibility. You're an adult. You're choosing to do whatever it is you're doing. So we may have a few places, that will want the athletes to come by and have pizza on their place and tell the fans that they're there. And there's no real harm in any of that. I don't lose much sleep over it. But I could see on the majors where it's going to be a big problem. It's going to be a problem on teams where they're trying to manage the egos between the teammates. I think that's going to be an issue, and which members of the team get access to boosters who are looking for talent to come by their place. I think they're going to have a lot of issues there, and you're going to have more agents involved because somebody's got to manage these major accounts that some of these kids will be able to get as brands associated with their name. So there are a lot of details to be worked out on all that. And then it's going to kick in on recruiting at some level between the majors. We're not competing for that type of kid typically. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of details to be worked out, but we're generally supportive of it.
Yeah, and I think again on the level of school and the level of student athlete that you work with there at the MAAC, I think it's actually just going to be super helpful. As you said, it's going to be something like, hey, like come have dinner. It's going
Yeah,
to be, hey, the
man.
local car dealership wants to give you $1,000 to take a picture in one of their cars, kind of thing, which is nice. I mean, shoot,
Don't
it's
wear
their
your uniform. You
yep,
can't.
exactly.
You
Yep.
can't say, "Come down here, Siena fans." You can say, "Come down here, college basketball fans, and meet
Hmm.
Joe. He's a great guy, and by the way, I love his car."
Yeah,
That.
yeah, yeah.
But you can't say, this is Rich
Hmm.
Ensor from St. Peter's, and I'm endorsing this, and come
Yeah.
down and buy the. There's going to be those kind of restrictions, which you also see in pro sports.
Hmm.
If you're, and I'm sure you know this, but if you're astute enough to watch commercials, which commercials have players wearing their team uniforms,
Yep.
which don't, that's all because there's a piece of that then goes back to the club. So those things are always negotiated. And I always, when I'm on the sports lawyers board of directors, and when I sit in those meetings, we have agents and everybody else on our board. It's an interesting group, and to listen to them tell war stories is always fun for me because that's just not that part of the business I work
Hmm.
with and regularly.
Yeah, it is always funny to see how close they can get that color green to the exact
Yeah,
jersey color without having it be like absolutely just without having the actual name of the team on there is always pretty funny to see. But it is interesting. I mean, I think I'm, obviously I'm for the players, and again, it's such a different conversation having it with you and the students you're dealing with. As you said, it's going to be a little different over there at Oklahoma and Texas and USC, where some of these kids, yeah, are coming in already with a million followers on one of these handles, and now these major brands are trying to attach themselves to the student athletes, to the colleges. It's going to get fuzzy, but I'm in favor of someone like, if I could go to school and do it. I mean, I didn't, but if I could, why can't this guy just because he plays football? It was never it didn't really make too much sense to me, but seems like you're kind of on board with it as well, and hopefully your student athletes will be able to take advantage of it. And again, not going to make $1 million, but man, they can make 4 or 5 grand. That's not a bad year, right?
yeah. Well, as long as they're also putting the time in to be a
Yeah, of
successful
course.
athlete and student, because if you don't have the grades, you're not playing,
Exactly.
and if you're not training, you're not playing, and if you're not playing, Joe Booster isn't going to
Yep.
be interested in giving you a free pizza.
I love it.
It's a fine line you're walking there. A lot of responsibility.
A lot of stuff going on, so we'll see. That's very interesting to me. One last thing before we really switch the conversation to everything that's happening lately. The Division One Council. So I know you are a former member of the Division One Council, but you are a part of the Division One Women's Basketball Committee. What
Yes, which
exact
reports to the council. I'm just
Perfect.
checking to see how the votes are going
Oh
today.
yeah. Do we have
Yeah.
this is live, so I don't know if you're allowed to tell us not or yet. Because I
Uh,
can break some news. I've never broken news before. I'd be
Never
down.
broken news. No, because they'll throw me out of the room
Ah,
the next
yeah,
time I showed up.
let's not do that.
Uh, uh, it's too detailed. I'm going to have to actually pay attention and read it. So we'll
Oh no.
pass on that for now.
Oh man,
But
I'm
they
so excited.
started meeting at 1:30, so there's a lot of voting going on right now.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well,
So
some
I've been part of the governance process for the last 20 years. I think the first 10 years of my career was really about the MAAC and getting the MAAC established, getting our TV contracts, getting our building relationships for the tournament and all that kind of thing. So after that first 10 years, the board of directors says, Rich, we need you to get more external too. And so external in the sense of a commissioner is to be involved with the NCAA, provide leadership for our subdivision and for the MAAC. And so I did. And so I slowly but surely worked my way into committee structure, and I've been on 4 different variations of the council over the last 20 years because we keep restructuring it, trying to make it better. Never quite succeeding, but in any case, I've seen 4 versions of it, and then there's subcommittees that you can serve on even if you're not on the council. So the Women's Basketball Oversight Committee is the governance arm of women's basketball within the structure. We have the sport committee, which I've also been on, which is the one that runs the championship, selects the teams, and all that kind of thing. And then the governance one really builds the structure for rules, regulations, um, getting the resources for women's basketball to be able to do branding, those kind of things. So we've been meeting a lot on the COVID-19 elements, as everybody is, but we're trying to get the season off and running again this year. So a lot of effort going into that. And then I've served on any number of. I've been on membership committee for the NCAA. I was on the committee on committees, which is a thankless task, but it has the benefit of putting people into positions on other committees. So you can have some influence on your own membership getting into committees and things like that. So it's a lot of grunt work in many cases, but I feel rewarded when I'm involved and help the league as part of that process.
The committee of committees. My goodness.
Yeah, it's not what they call it. They call it a nomination committee, but
all right.
basically the committee of committees. You know.
I was gonna say that is bureaucracy at its finest, right there.
The worst one I've been on a couple of horrible committees, not because of the people, but because of the tasks. I was on the initial eligibility clearinghouse, which was the committee they set up to get the whole clearinghouse set up so you could get the ACT or SAT scores matched up with all the transcripts and everything else. It worked out of the ACT offices in Iowa. We'd go out there and talk about logarithms for hours, and I'd get headache. I just get these huge headaches. I said, no, this is not what I signed up for. But that was a tough committee. But it's been successful with its program. It just took a few years. And then I was on the badly named antitrust deregulation committee. So, which we were trying to get rid of bylaws that were subject to perhaps antitrust scrutiny. But it was probably the worst name ever given to a committee because it just put a target on your back.
Yep.
But so anyhow, I've been involved in a lot of committees.
Committee of committees, man. That is just perfect. Thankfully, you are willing to go and do that. I mean, obviously, you have a lot of work trying to run a conference and do, all the things and help all these schools and the students and the athletes there, of course. And then it's just interesting to see kind of how much more is asked of you by the NCAA and what they do. And it's interesting. Again, as I said, as I opened up, I've never had the opportunity to speak with the commissioner.
Well, I was on a committee that dealt with the multi-team events, the tournaments that they run in the preseason space.
Okay. Yep.
And we used to regulate those a little bit more than we do now. But in the process of being on that committee, I got invited to the ACC women's soccer final, which was at Disney. I'd never been to Disney Sports. I met relationships there, and the next thing, now we have a 20-year relationship running events down at Disney Sports. So the MAAC, has benefited from the people I meet and the connections I meet through that process. And we also started to run MTE. So we're the host of the Orlando Classic, and at Disney we've run an event in Belfast, Northern Ireland. We've run a couple events with the Basketball Hall of Fame at Mohegan Sun. So there is a benefit directly to the MAAC, even if you're doing some unglamorous work in order to make those connections.
Still fun, man. Still fun. And so now I'm actually kind of curious. So you've been doing this for 30 years, over 30 years. Seems like you've been pretty darn successful doing it. Was there ever an opportunity, or was there ever a thought for you to maybe jump to a bigger conference? Because it seemed like you could have done it pretty easily.
Well, I'm a New Jersey guy to begin with, so I kind of like New Jersey.
Love it.
I have a family I was raising, so I started late raising a family, so I didn't really want to disrupt them too often, and I haven't, obviously, over 30 years. But I looked at a couple of jobs. I was involved with the Atlantic 10 job once when it was open. I was a finalist for that, and I was not a finalist, but I was in the pool for the Big East job when Val got it. So I've been looked at a couple of times, but frankly, there's more. You get to a point in your career, if you feel like you're doing good work, you're making a decent salary. You might make more at the Big East. I'm sure they do. But at the other hand, I wanted to be around with the kids and the family, and I travel 100 days a year now. If I was at a football conference, that's just the starting point for how many days you're on the road. And so I kind of liked where I was. So,
hey, I'm happy to hear it. It seems like, again, you're doing a pretty darn good job. So whatever you're doing, keep doing that. And now
not for that many more years, Michael, but yeah, we'll keep doing it for a while.
Can I break that news?
Sure. It's not news. It's already been.
How many
it's
more
out
years?
There. Right now, I'm through June of 22.
Okay. All right. Less than 2 years. Well, how perfect transition to everything that's going on in the world right now. You were so close. 2 years away.
I know.
You're going to have some fun. You're going to get out nice and easy.
I have mentioned that on a couple occasions lately. It's been tough. It's been a tough year. We moved to Atlantic City with our tournament. We worked on that event for 9 months trying to get it ready. We felt really good about walking in there. Things were really coming together. The look was good. The pickup at the hotels was good. It was all coming together. And we get there, and COVID-19, people start canceling coming. All anybody's talking about is COVID this, COVID that. And, by day 3, we had to cancel it. We were one of the last conferences to cancel it. Frankly, that was because of the NCAA. They just didn't manage it very well. We were on the last weekend. It wasn't like you just don't wave a wand and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. So the state of New Jersey had not said we had to shut down. There were no regulatory reasons we had to shut down. We're under contract to ESPN, to Boardwalk Hall, so we were running a championship and doing so in a very safe manner, but recognizing that everybody else is slowly shutting it down, And I remember the morning that we shut it down, I was talking to Val Ackerman at the Big East and Bernadette McGlade at the Atlantic 10, and we're saying, what are we doing? And New York City had not shut down the Big East, and Bernadette hadn't been shut down on her tournament. So we're saying, what's the NCAA doing? Because if they're not having a basketball tournament, there's no particular reason for us to keep playing. So ultimately, we got word that they were going to pull the plug, and then we announced we were shutting it down that day.
Yeah, it's just so unfortunate, man. I mean, that's as March Madness. That first 4 days of March Madness is one of my favorite 4 days of every year, and it's just so unfortunate. I love Championship Week as well. I mean, it's an absolute blast. You get to see schools like Marist, like Rider. I mean, I don't know if Rider's been to the.
They were right there this year. They would have been top of the field for both the men and the women. They were right in the mix. Yeah.
Well, Rutgers too. I mean, I know it's not nearly the same thing, but we were all excited it was going to be the Rutgers first time in the NCAA in 25 years or whatever. But
sure,
it's so unfortunate, especially for the kids, the seniors especially, and just
they're heartbreaks for those kids. And I had to go in and tell the teams, that we had a women's game going on. I wouldn't pull it at halftime. Val put.
Yeah, that was awkward. That was. I watched the first half. That was the last basketball. I was watching and I was like, "What are we doing, guys?" This is not
I didn't see the need to go out there and be all dramatic. Anything that was happening could wait 20 minutes. So
yeah,
everybody does what they have to do.
Of course.
But, we did have an infection. As it turned out, in retrospect, we had 3 of our officials were infected. We didn't know it. And as a result, our supervisor of officials got sick, and he was hospitalized at one point. And a few of others of us think we had it, and I've tested positive for the antibodies, although I can't really say I felt that sick anywhere along the line. So who knows? But yeah, it was obviously in the system. It was the right time to pull the plug, but it was a heartbreaking decision.
How do those conversations, like what are those, especially in the beginning when we had no idea really what was going on? We kind of knew there was something in China. They shut down a bunch of cities, and now it's starting to spread a little bit. That's kind of where I felt like we were. Once it happened that night with Rudy Gobert and the NBA, that's when it almost like, I don't want to sound stupid, but that's kind of when it became real for a lot of people. And it was just like
national story at that moment, right? Yeah, it was
shutting sports down. That's legit. Like, what are we doing? So what are the conversations you're having behind the scenes, and how quickly are those starting to really ramp up to, oh no, I think we might have to turn this off?
Well, we had the athletic administrator. We meet there anyhow at our tournament. So my athletic administrators were all meeting. I'm trying to get my timeline right here. I want to say we were meeting on Wednesday, and we met and we discussed it. I said it's starting to looking like we might have to pull the plug on this. Immediately half the room doesn't want to do anything, the other half aren't sure what they want to do. So it was going to take a while to socialize that whole concept of shutting it down. In the meantime, I was meeting by phone call with our board of directors and our executive committee, which is made up of presidents. I happened to have my attorney there because he was meeting with the ADs as just on a separate business item, had nothing to do with COVID-19. So it worked out all right that way. I had my attorney, we're meeting with the presidents. I go in and meet with the ADs, say, presidents are getting close to doing this. They want a recommendation from you all. You got to give me a recommendation. And then they draw it over for another 90 minutes. And I said, listen, you got 5 minutes. Yes or no? What are we doing here? So they made some recommendations. It wasn't to shut it down immediately, but there were some parameters about shutting it down. and what were we doing with all the other sports, frankly? You know, basketball was going on, but we had baseball teams heading to Florida and softball teams and everything else, because that's that time of year when all the spring sports are doing their non-conference play. So it was a bigger issue, and in many ways that was a bigger part of it, because those teams are all in transit. Some of them were already in other states, but the presidents, we finally had an indication from the NCAA that they were going to shut it down, and once that happened, it was easy. It was an easy decision with the presidents. ADs recognized that as well, but it was a little harder for them to take because they've got so much vested in it. And then I met with the coaches, that were there. We had a women's game going on, and another one set to take off right after that. I left the team alone that was playing. I got their coaches outside saying, this isn't looking good, but I'm not going to change anything till the game's over. And then I got the other two teams. They were getting ready to take the floor for warm-ups. I said, you guys just stay in your locker rooms for now. So once the game was over, and I already, at that point, the decision had been made, I told the team that won, that was it. And then I went in and told the other two teams they wouldn't be playing. So very sad. The players are upset. The coaches are upset. They're trying to take care of the players.
Yeah, it's just the worst is for the seniors. Like, that's the one that I just felt so bad. I mean, again, like when we're at that higher, as you said, the major college level, teams like Duke, most of them are only staying for a year. So yeah, it sucks. Of course, they wanted those last few games. I'm sure they wanted to do everything they could, but at the same time, those seniors literally will never have that opportunity again, and in any capacity, which is just so unfortunate. And I think one thing that is now starting to come into effect. Obviously, we're seeing football schools, football conferences, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 already said no, thank you. Now, there's a lot of public debate, of course, because for whatever reason, unless it's happened in the last about 36 hours, I have not seen either of those conferences really come out and say why they canceled. And I'm not going to ask you that. That's not really your place. But with all these other sports now getting canceled, how does this affect schools within, let's just talk about the MAAC some more. How does it affect schools that they're, basketball, we're still trying to figure out what to do. Baseball might not be coming back on time, lacrosse, so many of these sports have been canceled. How does this affect the schools? And then even potentially not even having kids on campus. What is this doing to psyche? What is this doing to culture, to mindset, to all these people that in the communities that these schools are invested in?
Well, it generally sucks, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean,
so
done. All right. Great interview. Thanks.
How can I sum that up in one or two words? We're institutions of higher education. Foremost right now in our minds is getting the schools up and running again for academics.
Yeah.
Athletics is just part of that conversation. And so these presidents and their institutions have been working nonstop to put in all the safety mechanisms that they possibly can dream of. The rates of infection in Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, where all my schools reside, are very low right now. So, but how do we get the students in from outside those areas? They've been doing 14-day quarantines and all that kind of thing have been set up. There's so much involved in it. So we're really hoping they can get up and running. But as we have already seen this week, UNC, Notre Dame, Michigan State, Ithaca yesterday, they're turning around saying, no, we can't do this. So I don't know where it's going to end up. It's not looking particularly good for on-campus learning. I think we're going to keep trying in the tri-state region because we have the low rates, but it's going to be challenging. For athletics, we did a lot of planning for the fall. We had some structures around trying to make sure the testing would be there to manage the competitions. The problem is there's not enough tests. There's not enough tests. There's not enough turnaround time on the tests. We need answers overnight, not 10 days later, because it means nothing if you're competing the next day. And they're too expensive. Right now, the average test is $90 a test. The NCAA is requiring us to do weekly tests just to practice. And if you're competing, you have to have a test within 72 hours of each competition. It's just not available. It's not there. So without the reliability of the testing and the cost of the testing, ultimately we had to pull the plug on the fall. As much as it wasn't, we thought we had structures that could accommodate competition, but not if we don't have the testing available. And it's a shame that we just haven't got our act together as a country on this. Now you add in all the issues that we're seeing with people not being willing to wear masks and social distance, and the minute they get back to campus, God forbid, this is a shock. 18-year-olds want to go out and party.
Weird.
Hard to believe. I never
Very.
did that. We would have hoped they would have been a little safer. Obviously, it's not working. So it's going to be a problem. But we keep our fingers crossed. Now, the next thing will be, if we're not having academics on campus, will we continue with winter sports on campus? I think we're committed to doing that. So we're thinking the testing will get better. But even if it doesn't get better, if you're only running a limited number of sports, and basketball is not a high number sport, it's not like some of our fall sports where there's just so many athletes. So we think we can manage the testing. But, there's still some real question marks how we're going to do that. We're looking at multiple models, that include the traditional model, which I don't think is going to happen, but would start November 10th. A model that would start later around Thanksgiving, which was historically when basketball started when I was in college. But and that model might involve some non-conference games, but it might just involve conference games. And then we have a model we're looking at that starts in January with just conference games, with the MAAC tournament and the NCAA where it is. And then the NCAA has floated an idea that maybe, if we have to, we'll start the traditional season in January. So you start what you would have started on November 10th on January 10th, and that the Final Four ends up somewhere in June. So
June Madness, I'm for it.
Yeah, well, who knows? I mean, we really don't know what'll happen.
Of course.
But so all these models are being worked on. You'll see a lot of talk about the majors wanting to do bubbles. Well, they have those $120 million budgets, so you have to spend them somewhere.
They have to spend them, huh?
Yeah, well, we don't have that $120 million, so I could see. I call it our cocoon. If we keep it within the conference, no non-conference games, we all have mutually assured ourselves what level we're testing at. We won't put each other at risk. We think we can run a conference through a pretty good season. It won't be the same as usual, but it'll be pretty good.
And that's what
I don't think we'll do I don't see how we could do the bubble. I don't see the finances of that being available.
That would be very difficult. I mean, it's worked, obviously, but again, that's with the NBA and the NHL.
That's $170 million operation down at Disney. Yeah, I know Disney pretty well. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, you do.
Yeah, those facilities are the ones that we use regularly when we're down there. Not the way they're set up right now, but
not quite.
Yeah, not quite.
Man, 2 years. You were so close. 2 years. Just didn't see this pandemic coming in at the end there.
Who knew?
No, and then I guess the last question I have, and I really do appreciate your time and hanging out. I know you're really excited to get back to that email with all those votes in it, but
we've been working on that for a while, Michael. There's some big votes coming down today.
I believe it. I'll get you
it's
back.
It's like inside politics,
No, thank you. Not that's not quite for me. I'll just get angry at that stuff. But the last thing I'm just curious about, and again, it's a lot of speculation, but what are some of the long-term effects to, again, canceling the March Madness and then, canceling a lot of these sports? I know, obviously, again, the short term, it sucks. We're going to see what happens. We'll see what we can do. But have you already started to look at, or have you already started to speculate on what some of these long-term effects might be, especially if we aren't able to have this basketball season and, football doesn't kick off like we expected it to? I mean, have those rumblings, has that kept you up at night at all?
Nothing keeps me up at night, Michael. But that's one thing. When the day's over, another day's coming. But first of all, you have to start with the pandemic. There's no assurances we're going to be out of this come next summer. We're an impatient culture, as we've demonstrated a lot recently.
To say the least, yes.
And but the virus doesn't report to us. It's kind of, and so I don't know where the virus is going. But if we have vaccinations, that'll help. But it's still probably going to take a couple of years to work this through this country's system between those that haven't been vaccinated and so forth. So we're going to be dealing with pandemic type regulations for a while, I think.
Well,
so that's just a reality. Then, as far as higher education, they're at a crossroads here. You see the online versus the on campus, the value proposition of not being on campus, and all those. We see a lot of litigation being formed. So they've got to sort that out. As far as athletics, again at the MAAC, we work at a very different level, and we're able to adjust our aspirations based on budgets. I mean, yeah, I like having 12 people here. I like having employees that are working hard towards a common goal. But if we had to make adjustments because the budget wasn't there, we did. And schools will do the same thing. We can cut back a little bit on sports if we have to, and the number of contests we do, the amount of travel we do. We can scale it back a little bit just to save some money for a couple of years. So I'm not too worried about sports surviving. The bigger question is the NCAA structure around the Final Four. That does fund a lot of things, not just at the NCAA office, but for D1, 2, and 3 operating budgets. And the MAAC gets a couple of $1 million a year from the distribution from the NCAA funds that help operate this place. Even in this reduced state that we're in now, if that keeps disappearing for a couple of years, we're going to have to think about what we're doing here. We own our building. We don't have a mortgage, so we have some benefits here. But, I'll have to come up with some plans depending on how that looks. And then the structure of the NCAA and D1, how much it gets fractured through the process we're going through right now. Not so much with basketball, but the football thing has gotten a little ugly with the Big 12 and the Pac-12 out. Not the Big 12, Big 10 and the Pac-12 out. I saw a YouTube thing earlier today that really is kind of funny, but it spoke to the whole issue. Where are these guys and what are you doing? And so I think they're going to have some real issues to sort out on that level, and that could impact the national governing scene. So some challenges. My crystal ball says we'll have athletics. It'll return to some normalcy in the next 18 months, and it'll grow from there. But we're still in for a rough period here.
It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate, and it's unfortunate I had to end on kind of a negative note, but you've been absolutely fantastic this whole time. Rich Ensor, commissioner of the Big MAAC, the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. I really appreciate your time today, man.
That was good talking, Michael. Good luck with the podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you.